Unpopular opinion. The nicest woman in every friend group is usually the one with the least amount of money actually working for her. Not because she earns less. Not because she's bad at her job. Often she's the smartest one in the room, the one everyone goes to for advice, the one who remembers your coffee order and your mother's surgery date and your ex's name, so she can talk badly about him with you. She is fluent in care. What she is not fluent in, what nobody ever taught her, is protecting her own money with the same energy she protects everyone else's feelings. Sit with that for a second because it is not an insult. It is a diagnosis. And once you can name a pattern, you can finally do something about it. Here's what makes this pattern so hard to catch. It never announces itself. Nobody wakes up one day and decides to become financially self-sacrificing. It is built in inches, in small moments of social math, where being liked quietly outbids being paid, over and over, until one day a woman looks at her bank account and cannot explain where 12 years of niceness went. Let's build the scene. A woman is up for promotion. She has outperformed her numbers for 2 years straight. HR sends the new offer, and the salary is barely above what she's already making. She genuinely knows, that she could push back. She has the leverage. She has the receipts. But something in her stomach tightens at the idea of seeming ungrateful, and so she writes back, "Thank you so much. This works for me," and closes her laptop feeling relieved instead of feeling robbed. That relief is the trap. That relief is what conditioning feels like from the inside. It doesn't feel like fear. It feels like being a good person. Here's a statistic worth sitting with. Research on salary negotiation consistently shows that women initiate negotiations at meaningfully lower rates than men, not because they don't know their worth on paper, but because women are more likely to anticipate social backlash for asking, and that anticipation alone is often enough to keep them quiet. The cost of that quiet, compounded over a 30-year career, has been estimated in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Not because the woman miscalculated her value. Because she calculated the cost of being seen as difficult and decided her paycheck would pay that price instead of her reputation. That's the pattern. Now, let's follow it somewhere more personal. Picture a bridal shower. Not yours, a friend's. The group chat decides on a venue that is, frankly, more than anyone budgeted for, but nobody wants to be the one who says it out loud. So everyone just agrees, and everyone quietly panics privately about rent that month. You show up. You smile in every photo, you Venmo $340 for a party that lasted 4 hours, and you tell yourself it's fine. It's for love. It's what women do for each other. Except love was never actually the expense. Silence was. Nobody at that shower wanted to spend that much. Everyone spent it anyway because the fear of looking like you don't have money is somehow more uncomfortable for women than actually not having money. That's worth repeating. A lot of women would rather quietly go without than visibly say no. And the internet has noticed this too. Scroll anywhere right now, and you'll find women posting about the wedding industrial complex, about bachelorette trips nobody can afford, about the unspoken rule that if you love someone you show it with your wallet, not your words. The commentary is everywhere, because the exhaustion is real. Millions of women are financially tired in the exact same way, from the exact same silence, and most of them think they're the only one. Now here's a different scene. A different kind of woman. Younger, maybe mid-20s, still building her career, still figuring out her relationship to money. She's dating someone new, and on the third date, he suggests splitting the bill evenly even though she ordered water and he ordered a steak and 2 cocktails. She notices. She says nothing. Because bringing up $11 feels smaller than her, feels like it will make her seem like she's keeping score in a relationship that hasn't even started yet. $11 is not the point. The instinct to stay quiet about $11 is the point. Because the same woman who won't mention $11 on a third date is often the same woman who, 5 years later, won't mention the fact that she's been covering the mortgage while her name isn't on the deed. The pattern doesn't start big. It starts microscopic, and it grows in the dark because nobody ever interrupts it early enough to notice. Let's widen the lens for a moment, because this shows up in places that don't even look like money at first glance. Think about the woman who hosts. Every family knows one. The one whose apartment becomes Thanksgiving, whose car becomes the group's second Uber, whose PTO becomes the default for picking up sick relatives from appointments, because she's so good at handling things. Nobody pays her for any of it, not literally, and she would probably be offended if you suggested they should. But the emotional logic underneath it is the same logic that let her accept the smaller raise, the same logic that let her Venmo the bridal shower without blinking. Somewhere, a long time ago, she learned that being needed and being valued financially could substitute for each other. They can't. They never could. But nobody corrected the math, so she kept running it. There's a phrase for this that's been circulating in psychology and sociology circles for a while now, the idea of the unpaid emotional CFO. She's the one managing the invisible budget of a family or a friend group. The birthdays remembered, the group gifts organized, the reservations made, the peace kept, all of it unpaid labor that somehow still gets billed to her personal account when the actual money question shows up. If this sounds familiar, it's because it is astonishingly common, and almost nobody names it out loud until they see it written down like this. There's another version of this story worth telling, because it doesn't always look like generosity from the outside. Sometimes it looks like ambition. Think about the woman who started her own small business, maybe a jewelry line, maybe a wellness brand, maybe a boutique consulting practice she runs from her kitchen table between calls. In the beginning, friends and family ask for the friend discount. She gives it once because it feels good to be generous with something she built. Except the friend discount never expires in anyone's mind but hers. 2 years in, she's still doing free logo redesigns for her cousin's side hustle, still comping her college roommate's order, just this one time for the 5th time, still undercharging every client who reminds her they've known her since high school. She would never let a stranger do this to her business. Strangers pay full price without a second thought. It is only the people she loves who get to quietly drain her margins, because saying actually that's $200 to someone she has history with feels like a betrayal of the relationship instead of what it actually is, which is just being a business owner. The moment money touches love, the pricing goes soft, and so does her bank account. This is the same root pattern wearing an entrepreneurial outfit. The nice girl discount isn't really about money either. It's about a woman's fear that charging what she's worth will somehow reveal that she thinks more of herself than the people around her do. As if value has to be modest to be acceptable. As if the moment she names her real price, someone might finally say what she's always quietly feared, that she was never actually worth that much to begin with. She is. She always was. The discomfort was never proof otherwise. It was just proof that she'd never practiced holding her own price steady under pressure. If this kind of financial psychology is something you want more of, subscribe. We spend real time here unpacking the quiet money patterns that shape women's lives long before anyone calls them by name. So let's talk about how this actually gets rewired, because awareness without a strategy is just a very expensive form of self-pity, and that's not what this channel is for. Start with what I'll call the pause tax. Before you say yes to any financial ask, whether it's splitting a bill unevenly, lending money, or covering a shared expense, give yourself one full breath before responding. Not to be cold. To interrupt the automatic yes that conditioning trained into you before you were even old enough to understand what money was. That single pause is often the entire difference between a decision and a reflex. Next, learn to name the number out loud. Financially secure women are not the ones who never feel awkward talking about money. They are the ones who talk about it anyway. Can we split this based on what we actually ordered? I can't do that, venue. Can we look at something closer to 200? These sentences feel enormous the first few times you say them. They get smaller every single time after that, the same way any muscle gets stronger the more you actually use it. Third, build what I call a softness fund. This is separate from your emergency fund, separate from your investments. It is a small, specific pool of money, maybe $200 or $300, that exists purely so you can be generous on your own terms without resentment. When you have a softness fund, saying yes to covering a friend's coffee or chipping in for a gift comes from abundance, not from guilt. The moment generosity starts costing you your own financial stability, it stops being generosity. It becomes debt you never agreed to take on. Fourth, and this is the one most women skip, start asking for delayed gratification instead of instant relief. When someone asks for money, The socially trained response is to solve their discomfort immediately, so the moment ends faster. Financially grounded women learn to say, "Let me think about it, and get back to you tomorrow." That sentence alone protects more money over a lifetime than almost any budgeting app you will ever download, because it removes the emotional urgency that makes people say yes to things they can't actually afford. Fifth, practice what negotiation coaches call anchoring your worth before the conversation even starts. Most women walk into salary conversations, rent splits, and financial negotiations reactively, waiting to hear the other side's number first, and then deciding whether to feel grateful or disappointed. Instead, decide your number before the conversation happens. Write it down. Say it out loud in the mirror if you have to. The woman who walks into a negotiation already knowing her number is not gambling on someone else's generosity. She is simply stating a fact she already decided on her own terms. Sixth, get comfortable with the phrase, "That doesn't work for me," and nothing else attached to it. Women are trained to justify every no with 3 paragraphs of explanation, an apology, and a reassurance that they still love and value the person asking. None of that is required. "That doesn't work for me" is a complete sentence. The more padding you add, the more room you leave for someone to negotiate you out of your own boundary. Let's zoom out for a moment, because there's a bigger picture worth naming. Women are entering their 30s and 40s right now with more education, more earning power, and more independence than any generation of women before them. And yet study after study on gender and personal finance keeps circling back to the same finding, that women still disproportionately absorb the emotional labor of keeping relationships financially smooth at the direct expense of their own long-term security. The math is not the problem. The permission is the problem. Somewhere along the way, being agreeable got quietly rebranded as being a good woman, and being financially assertive got rebranded as being difficult, cold, transactional. That rebrand was never true. It was just convenient for everyone except you. Think about how differently this plays out for the men in these same situations. A man who negotiates hard for a raise is seen as ambitious. A man who says he can't cover a bigger tab is seen as being financially responsible. A man who says no to funding someone else's plans is rarely accused of being unkind. The same behavior in a woman gets a different label entirely, and most women have internalized that different label so completely that they police themselves before anyone else even gets the chance to. This is why the fix cannot just be a spreadsheet. A budget will not undo 20 years of social training. The real fix has to happen at the level of identity, at the level of what a woman believes she's allowed to want without becoming unlovable for wanting it. Here is the mindset shift, and I want you to actually let this land. Protecting your money is not the opposite of being a warm, generous, deeply loving woman. It is what allows that warmth to be sustainable instead of self-destructive. A woman who has boundaries around her money is not choosing herself over the people she loves. She is choosing to still be standing financially and emotionally in 10 years, so she can keep showing up for them without quietly resenting every dollar it costs her. Because resentment is the real hidden cost here, more than any single Venmo request or missed raise. Every time a woman overrides her own financial instincts to keep the peace, a small amount of resentment gets stored somewhere in the relationship, unspoken, undealt with, waiting. It shows up later as sudden bursts of anger over something small, as emotional distance nobody can quite explain, as a woman who finally snaps over a restaurant bill, and everyone around her is confused about why she's so upset over $20, when really it was never about the $20. It was about the 15 years of $20 before it. Picture her now, this version of you a few years from where you're sitting. She still shows up to every celebration that matters to her. She still sends the thoughtful gift, still covers the coffee when she genuinely wants to, still cries a little at her best friend's wedding toast. But she also has a softness fund that never runs dry, an investment account that grows quietly in the background of her life, and a voice that no longer shakes when she has to say a number out loud. She didn't get there by becoming hard. She got there by refusing to let her kindness be the only unpaid line item in every relationship she has. She learned, slowly, that the people who actually love her do not disappear the moment she has a financial boundary. If anything, the relationships that survive her new voice are the ones that were real to begin with. The ones that quietly fall away were never actually about her. They were about what she was willing to absorb. There's a quiet moment that tends to happen for women somewhere in this process, and it's worth naming because nobody warns you it's coming. It usually happens the first time you set a financial boundary and brace yourself for the fallout, the awkward silence, the slightly cooler reply, the friend who takes a beat longer to text back. And then nothing happens. The world does not end. The relationship, if it was real, simply adjusts. And in that small, anticlimactic moment, something shifts permanently in how you see yourself. You realize the version of you that was terrified of being seen as difficult was protecting a fear that was never actually based on evidence. It was based on inheritance. Somebody else's fear, worn like a hand-me-down, mistaken for your own instincts. That is the real transformation this channel is trying to hand you. Not a stricter budget. Not a colder personality. A permission slip you should have been given decades ago. The one that says a woman can be endlessly warm and endlessly generous and still expect to be paid fairly, split evenly, valued fully, and taken seriously with her money, all at the same time, without apology, without a 3-paragraph explanation, without shrinking to keep someone else comfortable. That's the actual soft life. Not a life where someone else pays for your peace. A life where your own money finally, fully, unapologetically pays for it instead. You were never too nice for wealth. You were just never told that you were allowed to be both.